If witch hunting was meant to target women, why were thousands of men accused too, and why were some of them burned? Because witch trials were never really about magic. They were about fear, mixed with politics, religion, grudges, and legal systems that valued confession over truth. Once forced confessions became the standard, the hunt stopped looking for guilt and started feeding on momentum. Even the word warlock needs clearing up. Today it means male witch, but historically it meant oathbreaker or deceiver. It wasn't an identity, it was an accusation meant to destroy credibility. So when people talk about top warlocks, they usually mean the most revealing cases where men were prosecuted as witches and executed, often by burning or by strangling before burning, as was common in places like Scotland. Number 9. John Fian. John Fian remains one of the most revealing male witchcraft cases in early modern Europe. A schoolmaster swept into the North Berwick witch panic during the reign of King James VI. Fian's story reads like a blueprint for how a witch hunt functions once it gains momentum. He was accused of sorcery and conspiracy, tortured repeatedly, and forced into confession. He was executed in 1591, following the standard Scottish practice of strangling and burning. What makes his case historically important is not the spectacle, but the process. Confession led to names. Names led to new arrests. Evidence became optional. The system fed on itself. Once confession becomes the engine, truth becomes irrelevant. The hunt survives by expanding. Number 8. Svein Arneson. Svein Arneson was executed in 1683 and is widely cited as the last person put to death for witchcraft in Iceland. His case sits at the end of a distinctly Icelandic pattern, where witchcraft prosecutions disproportionately targeted men rather than women. Arneson was burned at the stake, not because he matched a folkloric image of a witch, but because learned practices, runes, symbols, and written knowledge were treated as dangerous. In a society where literacy carried authority and power, knowledge itself became suspicious. His execution underscores a central truth of witch hunting: it never followed a universal script. It adapted to local fears and targeted whatever a society decided looked most threatening. Number 7. Jean Riggenvaldsson. Jean Riggenvaldsson was executed in 1625 during the early phase of Iceland's witchcraft persecutions, when legal systems were still testing how far accusations could stretch. His charges focused on runic symbols and alleged sorcery, a recurring theme in male-focused cases across the region. The pattern is revealing. The evidence is rarely a witnessed act of harm. Instead, it is writing others cannot read, symbols others cannot interpret, and books others do not understand. When knowledge becomes frightening, literacy becomes incriminating. History shows that once writing feels exclusive, it is only a matter of time before it is treated as forbidden. Number 6. Johannes Junius. Johannes Junius was a respected civic official caught in the Bamberg witch trials in the Holy Roman Empire. His case is preserved through a surviving prison letter in which he described torture, coercion, and the forced confession of crimes he insisted he never committed. He was executed by burning. His story matters because it illustrates escalation. Once the socially marginal are exhausted, the hunt turns inward. Officials accuse officials. Respectability becomes irrelevant. The system cannot stop without admitting error, and admitting error would collapse everything built on the earlier confessions. At that point, the hunt chooses expansion over truth. Number 5. Urbain Grandier. Urbain Grandier was a French priest, executed in 1634, burned at the stake after being convicted of witchcraft in connection with the Lodun possessions. Modern historians frequently interpret his case less as a supernatural panic and more as a collision of politics, scandal, and institutional rivalry. This is witchcraft accusation at its most practical. When someone becomes inconvenient, the charge becomes useful. It carries moral weight, religious fear, and legal finality, all without requiring material proof. Grandier's execution shows how easily witchcraft law could be repurposed as a tool of power. Number 4. Gilles Garnier. Gilles Garnier's execution in 1574 reveals just how elastic witchcraft law could become when fear demanded an explanation. Grandier was convicted of crimes framed as both witchcraft and lycanthropy, accused of transforming into a werewolf to commit acts of violence. He was burned at the stake, not because the court believed in zoological impossibilities, but because the narrative fit the emotional needs of the community. Cases like Grandier's show that witch trials were not constrained by logic or consistency. Werewolves, sorcerers, devil pact makers, and poisoners could all be absorbed into the same legal framework. The law did not require coherence. It required a villain. Fear did not need evidence. It needed a story that explained suffering and assigned blame. Once that story took hold, the verdict became inevitable. Number 3. George Burroughs. George Burroughs stands out as a striking anomaly in the Salem witch trials. He was the only minister executed during the proceedings, and unlike European cases, his death came by hanging rather than burning. Executed in 1692, Burroughs's case is remembered for a moment that briefly cracked the certainty of the crowd. Standing on the scaffold, he recited the Lord's Prayer flawlessly, something many spectators believed a witch could not do. For an instant, doubt spread. If a witch could pray perfectly, then the rules themselves were unstable. But the execution continued anyway. That moment reveals a brutal truth about witch hunts. Once accusation becomes socially profitable and publicly affirmed, evidence can no longer compete with momentum. Burroughs's religious authority did not save him. In fact, it may have made his fall more necessary, proving that no one was beyond suspicion. Number 2. John Stuart. John Stuart does not appear in history books because he was famous, powerful, or controversial. He appears because he was ordinary. Scottish judicial records list him as a man executed for witchcraft in 1677, with the method recorded as strangling followed by burning. That single line is enough to dismantle a common myth that Scotland's witch trials targeted only women. Women were indeed the majority of the accused, but Stuart's case shows that men were fully within reach of the system. His execution matters precisely because it lacks spectacle. It demonstrates how witch hunting functioned as routine governance. Not every victim was dramatic. Many were processed quietly, efficiently, and forgotten. History is harsher than legend because it is often boring in its cruelty. Number 1. Finnmark, Norway. The Finnmark witch trials in northern Norway represent one of the most intense episodes of Scandinavian witch hunting. Dozens were executed, primarily by burning, in a region shaped by extreme climate, religious pressure, and frontier politics. While women made up the majority of the accused, the scale and ferocity of the trials reveal something deeper than gender targeting alone. Finnmark shows how witchcraft accusations could intersect with fear of outsiders, ethnic tension, environmental hardship, and centralized authority. In such conditions, witch hunting became a way to impose order on chaos. The trials mattered not because they fit a neat pattern, but because they refused to. Geography, power, and anxiety reshaped the hunt into something uniquely brutal. There was no single profile of a witch, only a recurring mechanism that adapted to whatever a society feared most at that moment. History doesn't repeat itself because people forget facts. It repeats when fear is rewarded, doubt is punished, and accusation becomes easier than evidence. If you want more deep videos like this, like and subscribe.